Imagine a world where age didn't matter, where we didn't judge you for being old or you didn't spend your entire life trying to stay young. I've been fascinated by this topic ever since a late-night conversation with my Los Angeles neighbor. He was 56 and I was 36, and we both spent our entire careers making marketing and advertising. But every year, we'd get a bit older, and the people that we were marketing to stayed the same age, normally in their 20s. It didn't make any sense. Was I starting to become irrelevant? It makes even less sense when you think about it from a societal perspective, because we encourage you to spend your entire life building up wealth, knowledge, wisdom. But only when you hit peak in those areas do we just kind of disengage and stop talking to you. So I had to start thinking about this more, and I wanted to do some research. And don't judge me, I got as far as the retirement page on Wikipedia. There it told me a couple of things. Firstly, that in 1905 there'd been this speech by a prominent physician called William Osler. William had declared that man's best work was done before the age of 40. He said after the age of 40, up to the age of 60, man was tolerable but uncreative. But I did the math, and he was 55 at the point of giving this speech, so I have no idea what was going on. But he went on to say that after 60, man was done and should be put out to pasture. 20 years later, Roosevelt passes the Social Security Act, which basically mandates retirement at age 60. And that act did a lot more than give a bit of fresh air to people in factories. From my side, that mandated a kind of a watershed, a cultural watershed. Because if you fast forward 100 years, like a lot has changed. We're living longer, sure. The nature of work has changed, almost unrecognizably so. The age of retirement has moved up a little bit. It's now 66 years and 2 months. But we as a society are still pretty cool with the idea that there's this time and a place where you just kind of expire in terms of usefulness. So we've got a bit of a culprit in the idea of retirement, but it's certainly not how we fix it. For that, you need to understand a little bit more about human nature and understand that we love to follow other humans. You see, I learned that from marketing and advertising. We are basically sheep. If you consider, for example, how youth culture came about, pre-1950s, there was no youth culture. You were either a kid or you're an adult. In fact, if you were a kid then, you tried to dress older. But a post-war generation decided that they did not want to be like their parents, and so they started a counterculture. Heroes of the counterculture sprung up. Their followers followed. More heroes of stage, of screen, of art and literature. Followers came. Ideas spread. And every successive generation has had heroes of this youth culture and tons of followers. It's youth culture and culture in general is now so fast and so vibrant. Trends come and go so quickly that it's possible to carve out a career as a professional influencer. Think about that. So, who are the heroes once you hit 50? Is it still Mick Jagger? And that's really weird to me because the things you get into during the course of a lifetime, you should imagine that the amount of influencers and heroes almost exponentially increase. But where are they? So my neighbor and I decided we needed to go and get some fresh inspiration. So we actively sought out people that were aging differently. They were determined to not live and die like their parents. And we found some people in pockets, and we had some questions for them. But when we got to the question, who do you look up to? They just looked at us blank. So if those guys don't know who to look up to, it's hardly surprising if the average person approaching their 60th birthday thinks they've got no other option than just to put themselves out to pasture on a golf course somewhere. Back to our interviews. Over the next 3 or 4 years, we interviewed literally hundreds of people that were doing things differently. These guys were starting businesses. They were in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. They were taking on projects that they were absolutely crazy, but in many ways, the sum total of all the things that they'd learned throughout their life. These guys were not done yet. They were determined to do things differently. Now, we thought we were onto something pretty amazing here, and so we decided to tell people about it. And I decided to try and start writing up some of these discussions. And I failed almost straight away. I failed because I realized that language itself is inherently ageist. It's impossible to write a sentence about an older person without that person suddenly invoking a sense of pity or being done somehow. You want proof? Let's put older person into Google Images. Older person. It's hardly very inspiring, is it? Let's try a qualifier. Older person doing exercise. Yeah, this is just old people doing old people stuff. Try another one. Okay. Older person on a computer. Now, you can try this at home, right? You can do this all day. But I think you get my point. Well, actually, do you? I guess my point was this was very different from the people that we were talking to. You want to see someone that knows how to use a computer? This guy, he's almost 60. He's starting a business on the blockchain. Someone who knows exercise? Michael, he's a professional dancer in his late 50s. Mary's not a professional dancer, but she's put a chin-up bar in her bathroom. Bart, he's neither. I just like Bart because he's a globally recognized expert on denim. The over 50s is worth an estimated $15 trillion worldwide. In America alone, the over 50s control 70% of all discretionary spending. But as a society, we just don't talk to them. We don't talk to them because we are, as a culture, infatuated and besotted with youth. Have you ever thought why that is? Now, there's lots of explanations to why this is, but as a marketing guy, I find it very convenient to blame the marketing guys. Two things. Firstly, within marketing, there's this theory of the entry point consumer. Entry point consumer theory says that if you hit a person at the point that they become a consumer, 15, 16, 17, you hit them with your brand message then, you have them loyal to your brand for life. Right. Show of hands, anyone that's met a 15, 16, or 17-year-old recently, okay? They don't remember you. Secondly, it all got really complicated when digital media and social media came along. Because advertising agencies were struggling to look cutting edge for a minute, and they would go into their clients and say, look, there's a generation of kids out there that have grown up only consuming content on phones. They are digital natives. They think differently. Like, these are the only people in the whole of the US that can use an iPhone, right? And basically, they said, we need to reach these digital natives in completely new ways. And then what the agency will do is show them a picture, show the client a picture that looks something like this. Points to anyone, by the way, that knows what's going on in this picture. And the client, who's probably a man or a woman in their 50s, suddenly feels horribly out of touch. They're like, make the ads. Let's reach the digital natives. So the agencies scurry off and make the ads. And essentially, market forces just do the rest. Because the competitors of that company see the ads that they're making and think, oh my goodness, they're going after digital natives. We should too, because they don't want to appear fuddy-duddy and past it. Meanwhile, the consumers that have built the brands, by spending their money over the last 2 or 3 decades, have been completely shut out. No one's speaking to them. We're all chasing youth. Now, the ad agencies haven't got this completely wrong. Young people, yes, they do adopt digital platforms pretty fast. They have the time, okay? But it's also true that they're pretty quick to leave them. The agencies neglect to say that around half of all over 50s are on Facebook, and logically, Instagram too. They also neglect to say that the people that buy the most Apple products, buy, not necessarily use, are men in their 50s and 60s. But the agencies aren't completely stupid. In fact, they know how to read statistics and demographics, and they're aware that in the over 50s is the biggest and most wealthy generation to ever have lived. They just don't know what to do about it. The average person that works in an advertising agency is well under 40, and so the only experience that they've really got of this consumer is their mum and dad. And that's not really a very cool starting point. But then also, if you understand that language itself, as we've seen, is kind of spring-loaded against you, it's easy just to ignore this. It's easy just to go with what you know. So what do we do about it? Well, I'll tell you what we don't do about it, and that's go off and do a big deal with the AARP. As the association that was set up to tend to Roosevelt's pastures, the people that we speak to see those guys as the Grim Reaper. You get that little mailer through your door on your 50th birthday, you're on the clock. No, and this is a heartfelt thing, that I believe that change has to come from all levels of society. It has to come from writing and casting. It has to come from fashion, styling, modeling. It needs to come from marketing and advertising, sure, but HR, PR, investing. It needs to come from all different areas. But most of all, I think we need new heroes. As a 40-year-old guy, I've never been more interested in the most important things in life. I want to know what to value. I want to know how to live life. I want to know how to judge beauty, what health is really about. But critically, I want to understand this from the perspective of someone who has truly lived. I want to understand from Patty what it takes to get up every day and go surfing. How do you keep that up? I want to understand from Peter how you go about becoming an expert at age 75 in something that you only started studying when you turned 50. I want to understand whether rowing across the Atlantic is something that anyone can do in their 50s. What does it take to prepare for that? I want to understand from Tracy how you go about setting up a venture capital firm as an African-American woman in your 50s. What are the barriers you're facing? What are the opportunities you're seeing? And finally, I want to understand what happened to Gilles the day he got the diagnosis from his doctor, that when he woke up the following morning, he put himself on a path to change his health to look like this. My dad taught me about the paradox of aging. He says when you're young, you have time and you have energy, but no money. In the middle age, you have money, you have energy, but no time. You know how this goes, right? Well, I would contend that today's 50-plus consumer and going forward are the first generation ever to have all three of those: time, energy, and money. So in that respect, youth and young adulthood, to me, are kind of like the minor leagues. That's where you pick up your skills, you start to practice, you hone your interests to put it all together when you hit your prime in your 50s. So for those of you that are sitting there thinking, Matt, this is really interesting, but it doesn't apply to me. I haven't got a marketing budget. I'm not looking to grow my audience. I'm in my 20s. This is way off. Let me ask you this. Are you planning on being 50? Are you planning on being 60? You should be so lucky because not everyone makes it to 60. But if you're planning on being 60 and you want people to talk to you the same way they talk to you today, then this is your problem too. Thank you.